Hello everyone and welcome to the IFST webinar, Status and Evolution of UK Packaging Legislation, organised by the IFST's Food Regulatory Special Interest Group. My name is Ash Stretton and I will be chairing the session today. I am the Regulatory Affairs Manager for Marks & Spencer and the Chair of the Regulatory Affairs Special Interest Group, also known as the SIG, of the IFST. Additionally, I'm a Fellow of the IFST, Registered Food Safety Principal, and a Chartered Scientist accredited by the IFST. I hold master's degrees in International Business, Agriculture and Food Science, and Food Law. This event has been arranged by the Regulatory Affairs SIG to discuss both the current status and the ever-changing evolution of UK packaging regulations, and have lined up two highly regarded speakers to talk us through their perspective on the topics. This webinar is sponsored by the International Food and Drink event, IFE, who are running their immersive and interactive exhibition between the 21st and 23rd of March at the Excel London. Register free on the IFE website at ife.co.uk and look out for the IFST stand at the event. Next slide, please. So this webinar is being recorded and will be uploaded to the IFST's webinar hub after the event finishes. Feel free to make comments and ask questions throughout the webinar using the Q&A function, which should be at the bottom of your screen, depending on your device. There will be a Q&A session after the presentations where we will respond to as many of these questions as possible. Our speakers today are Tim Chandler and Jude Allen. Tim is a Senior Policy Advisor focusing on food contact materials for the Food Standards Agency and has been with the FSA since 2010. Tim holds a bachelor's degree in biochemistry and an MSc in environmental technology. Jude is chair of the Institute of Materials, Minerals and Mining, otherwise known as IOM3, and has worked globally across London, New York, Singapore and Shanghai for nearly 20 years and has worked very closely with Budweiser, Mars, Molten Brown, McVitie's, Dulex Plates and Hippies. Jude holds a bachelor's degree in material science. So with that, I will hand over now to Tim. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ash. Welcome everybody. So my presentation will specifically be on FCM legislation in the UK. So I will also be briefly covering regulated product approvals and also requirements related to alternative materials. So you may have interest in bio-based materials and alternative materials that contain recyclate. So just to give you a little bit of an overview of the Food Standards Agency, it was founded in 2000. It is a non-ministerial government department, so we do not report directly to ministers. Our headquarters are in London, but we also have offices in York, Birmingham, Cardiff and Belfast. And our remit is that we are responsible for protecting public health in relation to food in England, Wales and Northern Ireland. And Food Standards Scotland is responsible for consumers in Scotland. And I should clarify that food also includes the safety of food contact materials. So the Food Contact Material Policy Team is a team of three. That is myself, Vincent Greenwood and Mike Turner. And we report to the head of branch. The head of branch covers food additives, flavourings and contact materials. So we are quite a large branch and we cover a variety of different policy areas. And this sits under the Chemical Safety Policy Unit, which is headed up by Peter Quigley. So in my team, we specifically deal with policy development and risk management functions. And this is similar across all other policy teams within the Food Policy Division at the Food Standards Agency. Risk assessment is handled by our colleagues in the Science, Evidence and Research Division. And we also have a number of scientific committees which provide expert advice. And we also have, from the start of last year, the regulated products approvals team, and this supports the regulated products application service. So this is if there is a specific product that needs authorizing, and they will be able to support that during its life cycle. So I wanted to sort of ease you in gently to the world of food contact materials. So I thought I'd share the for food contact symbol. Some of you may have seen this on some of the packaging that you have purchased. It is not always on everything. There are specific requirements for labeling food contact materials. So either this symbol or the words for food contact, or a clear description that the product is intended for food contact use. So even if it says it's a slotted spoon, that should suffice, because that would be quite obvious that it's going to be brought into contact with food. And hopefully you'll be able to see, I've put a little circle around the wine glass and fork symbol that's on this packaging to the right of your screen. And I should say that this symbol is retained in national legislation for Great Britain. So there's actually quite a lot of information on this slide, food contact materials. Whilst there is quite a lot of information here, it actually doesn't cover absolutely everything. So what I've set out here is those that are related to England. So that's the materials and articles in contact with food, England Regulations 2012, as amended. So as we built up towards the end of the transition period, we had to put through a number of amending regulations to make the existing regulations applicable to the UK. So I've listed the amending regulations there with the direct links. What it's really important to do is open up the amending regulations alongside the original 2012 regulations, and you'll be able to see where the amendments have taken place, because at the moment there isn't a consolidated version. And also if you're looking specifically for Wales, Northern Ireland and Scotland, you will need to refer to the appropriate regulations. So these regulations, they execute and enforce the EU regulations, and for GB, these were retained, and I'll be coming onto some of those regulations shortly. So this is the main framework regulation, that's 1935/2004. So in GB legislation, this was retained alongside regulation 2023/2006 on good manufacturing practice. So the main Article 3, this sets out the main requirements for safety and quality. So food contact materials should not transfer substances into food at levels that could either endanger human health, unacceptably change the composition of the food, or bring about a deterioration in the organoleptic characteristics. So the European Commission has been carrying out an evaluation of the EU framework regulation, and there are plans for reforming this. And I've provided a link to that. So these slides will be circulated following this meeting, and you'll be able to go directly to the European Commission website and the regulation. And we're also looking at it from the UK perspective to see what may be appropriate moving forwards. But at the moment, we have made no changes to the retained requirements. So moving on to the plastics regulation 10/2011. This is quite a large regulation. There's a lot of different requirements. Definition of plastic is a polymer to which additives or other substances may be added, which is capable of functioning as a main structural component of the final material article. All plastics expected to come into contact with food and placed onto the GB market must comply with the requirements under retained 10/2011. What I would say is if you are placing onto the GB market a food contact material, I would recommend going into legislation.gov.uk because this will ensure that you're referring to the GB requirements as opposed to EU requirements. And also, as what was happening at the EU level, a declaration of compliance is also required still for a food contact material that's placed onto the market. And this will be accompanied by a laboratory certificate confirming that there are no sort of substances migrating in quantities above a level which could be detrimental to human health. And within this regulation, there is an authorised positive list of substances that can be used for the manufacture of plastic articles. And this will sort of set out certain requirements, how much can be used, and what the specific migratory limit will need to be. And we've retained the authorised list as it was at the end of the transition period within GB legislation, and we will subsequently be adding to this list as and when we've finalised our assessments. So I'll move on to another regulation. This is the Recyclable Plastics Regulation 282/2008. So this sets out requirements in relation to recycled plastic materials and articles that are placed onto the market. So this regulation is in place because there could be residues from previous use, contaminants from misuse, or contaminants from non-authorised substances that need to be taken into account. So the requirements of this regulation stipulates that recycled plastic material and articles can only be placed onto the market if they've been acquired from an authorised recycling process. So at the EU level, a number of assessments had been carried out dating back to from 2010 and continuing, but no authorised list has been published to date. And that's the same now for the UK, but there is the opportunity for recycled plastic processors to make an application. So EFSA has been about 2010, and the European Commission is now expected to publish their first wave of authorization decisions towards the end of this year. But in the meantime, they're looking to introduce a new regulation which will replace Regulation 282. And that's something that we are looking at to see what may be appropriate for GB going forwards. And we will also, in our legislation, need to stipulate a specific deadline for receiving applications, given the fact that there is no authorised list of processes in GB. And it also allows business operators the opportunity to apply and ensure that they're on the first list that gets published. And so this sort of briefly covers the GB regulated products authorization process. So this is just the main page on our website, and I've provided a link that you can go to directly to see it. So for food contact materials, there are 4 regulated products. They are additives in plastic, additives in regenerated cellulose film, and additives in active and intelligent materials. And also, as I briefly mentioned, recycled plastic processes. But if you're also interested in placing another regulated product onto the market, it's worth checking this website out and you can see what may be applicable. And we've also published a bespoke page on food contact material applications. So again, this sets out the 4 different types of regulated products that you can make an application for. So I'll move on to alternative materials. So this is bio-based food contact materials and articles. It may also involve using recycled plastic, and I'll sort of come on to that a little bit later. So the definition of a bio-based food contact material is that they refer to products that mainly consist of a substance or substances that are derived from living matter, i.e. biomass, and which may occur naturally or are synthesized, or to products that are made by processes that utilize biomass. So what's really important is that some bioplastics may come under the scope of the Plastics Regulation 10/2011. And if that is the case, then that particular article may need to have a declaration of compliance in place and follow the requirements, including testing requirements set out within that regulation. So we have seen probably for the last 3 or 4 years a number of articles that are being developed and placed onto the market with regards to bio-based food contact materials, but we want to understand more about the products that are being developed. So we would definitely encourage anyone that has any questions or that they would be willing to sort of share information on their materials to come to the FSA, and we can also check to see, you know, whether they are sort of looking at the appropriate requirements and the legislation. But why are we seeing an increase in these food contact articles? Well, there's a number of reasons, and it too. There's been an increased demand. There was also the Environmental Protection Bill, which covered plastic straws, cotton buds, and stirrers. So there has been a drive to introduce more alternative materials, looking at sort of sustainability perspectives as well. And I'll be going on to another slide shortly, and this sets out other UK government initiatives. So the Treasury will be introducing a tax from April of this year. So that's the plastics packaging tax. And this will apply to plastic packaging manufactured in the UK with less than 30% recycled content. The Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, DEFRA, they had published several consultations, and this is on reforming the UK packaging producer responsibility system. So this is a drive to increase the amount of recycled material on the market, but also to produce more material that can be easily recycled. There's also the consistency in household and business recycling collections in England, and deposit return schemes also for England, Wales and Northern Ireland. And the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy has also been looking at bio-based and biodegradable materials, and they ran a call for evidence back in 2019, and the summary of responses are available on their website. So what needs to be considered for bio-based novel food contact materials and articles? Well, it's really important to ensure that they are compliant with the relevant regulations. So has everything being considered if the intention is for it to be a food contact material. So what are the potential risks? Well, is it going to be safe in expected use? These are materials that may have not previously been used in an abundance for bringing into contact with food. So it's important to ensure that whatever's being used is going to be safe. So if they are natural, is there the potential for there to be any proteins? Will an operator need to ensure that they are being, processed in a way to remove those proteins, to ensure that there's no allergenicity or intolerance issues? Some products are intended to be brought into direct contact with the mouth or lips. So again, there's some additional considerations there. There might be an increased risk. So it's really important that operators are looking clearly and closely at the types of materials they're using and checking to see if they're appropriately processed and appropriate to be used for food contact. And are there any other risks as well? So there could be non-intentionally added substances that could be added, like during, for example, the processing. And with regards to labeling, is it adequately labeled? So in the retained requirements under Article 15, special instructions should be observed for safe and appropriate use. So for example, if something is being served loosely, it may be appropriate for a warning or an instruction to set out what could be potentially being used in that product. Recycling. Again, does it take into account if it uses recycled content? Can it be easily recycled again? There's lots of different things that you need to consider. So yeah, we have been proactive by providing advice to businesses developing novel and bio-based food contact materials. And as I mentioned earlier, please feel free to contact the Food Standards Agency if you have any questions or want to check that the regulations that you are looking at are applicable in the circumstances. So what has the FSA been doing in this area? So we've been quite active in this area over the last few years. So we've set up an internal cross-agency group on bio-based food contact materials. So we're liaising with a number of different departments within the FSA across the devolved nations, including Food Standards Scotland. And this has been really helpful in helping us to sort of understand what we might do in the future in terms of potential updates to the retained requirements on food contact materials. We've also met with several businesses developing these materials, and we've provided advice but based on what we know and the legislation that's currently available. We've also small and medium enterprises, and we're aiming to publish this in the summer. So this has been something that we've been working on for the past year. It's gone through a number of iterations, but we're hoping that it will be ready in the next few months and we can get that published. And that will hopefully give businesses the opportunity to sort of ask the questions before they start sort of setting out what they're looking to do in terms of developing a material. We've also got an internal scraper tool for sending us relevant media articles on this subject. So that's sort of been really helpful. Make sure that we're sort of keeping on top of what's being developed across the whole globe. And I've also provided links to two research projects, one which was carried out by FERA, and that was a review of bio-based food contact materials. And we also had a PhD student which carried out a report on market and safety analysis of alternatives to plastic food contact packaging. And the Committee on Toxicity, which provides independent advice to the Food Standards Agency, has also started to focus on this topic. Again, I would recommend that you refer to their website, and you'll be able to see what papers have been published on this subject. There has been some papers on chitosan and chitin, and on plastic articles containing bamboo. So in summary, the materials and articles in contact with food regulation should be referred to. The FCM policy team is exploring potential updates to retained requirements. And what's really important again is to highlight that regulated product applications for new substances in plastic FCM, regenerated cellulose film and active intelligent materials, plus also recycled plastic processes, will require an application to the FSA. But to note that for active and intelligent materials and recycled plastic processes, we will need to set a deadline for receiving those applications. But you're still welcome to make an application, but we will publish further guidance on this in due course. And that will be back on the regulated products page specifically for food contact materials. And finally, the safety of novel alternative FCM, including those with recycled content, needs to be assured. So I've come to the end of my presentation now. Thank you all for listening. I will now pass you over to Jude Allen.
So thank you very much to Tim for that in-depth look at what's going on and the legislation. I'm going to just talk you through from a kind of like a design and packaging perspective of what that looks like. So as Ash said at the beginning, I chair the IOM3 packaging group. So IOM3 is leading science and engineering professional body that promotes and develops all aspects of the material cycle. So we're all over all materials, but it's the home of the IOM3 packaging group is where I sit, and we represent packaging professionals working across the sector. And I have spent most of my career working in packaging design, and when you work in packaging design, then you have to work within the legislation and the requirements that are there, but you also want to try and push the boundaries. We look at the material used, making sure it's the right material for the right job. We also look at format, so form and function of the format, which has always been ergonomics and functionality, but has increasingly been more about sustainability, which is music to my ears. It's one of the reasons I got involved in the industry in the first place. And then graphics, because it's really important that people actually know what's in that piece of packaging. How easy is it to recognize and to understand, you know, what the product is, what the brand is, all of those communication things, but then the detail of what is it that it is packaging and what do you need to know about it. All of that needs to be captured in the thing that you throw away at the end. And most people really only engage in packaging at the point where they've taken the product that they want out of it and they're about to throw it in the bin, and it's done such an amazing job to get that product to you safely. So we are here to talk about packaging legislation, and I am going to run through some of the things that Tim's actually already spoken about, but one of the things that I wanted to make clear is that this time now is a really interesting time. There are generational changes happening in packaging legislation. I started my career as PRNs came in, so packaging recycling notices, and I am at the other end of my career as they are going out the door and new legislation is coming in. So things like this don't happen very often. It's important what we're doing, and it's important to get it right. So packaging legislation. The principle of what the government is doing with the legislation is trying to push us more towards designing for a more circular economy. So taking us away from that, you make something, you use it, you throw it away mentality, and thinking more about what are we actually doing, reducing waste and being more aware of the value of things that are in what we use. So the first thing is the plastic packaging tax. Funnily enough, the HMRC tax is hitting its deadlines and will come into force on the 1st of April. It does mean that there will be a tax of £200 per tonne unless you include 30% recycled content. Now, there is a threshold of 10 tonnes of plastic packaging in 12 months, but the principle is that we're looking at making sure that things have got, where possible, 30% recycled content. And if they haven't, they will be a tax. Now, there are so many questions about this, about whether or not there will be enough material, whether or not like all packaging can have that recycled content. But the driver is there in the in the principle of you need to set a level playing field, and then the infrastructure that's required and for everybody to move will happen. So that is what is happening with the plastic packaging tax. Then the DEFRA work is the Environment Act 2021, which covers a suite of policies, as Tim has already mentioned: packaging extended producer responsibility, deposit return scheme, and consistency of collection, all of which are really important. The one I'm going to focus on is packaging extended producer responsibility, because it's the key one for us in EPR. If the deposit return scheme comes in for drinks, on the go drinks probably, then it's a slightly different situation for those. But if we just think about packaging extended producer responsibility as being what we need to look at for all packaging. And the principle, in simple terms, of what extended producer responsibility is that the producer pays. The brand owner or importer will be responsible for the full net cost of recovering and recycling packaging. This is a big change, and it is a big change in terms of the cost for the whole value chain, and how we look at the emphasis on recovering and recycling that packaging. And I know that we're an audience of food and drink here, but this is for all packaging, not just food and drink. This will apply to everything. Everything that you buy that is packaged, it will apply to that. There are a few exceptions in terms of if it's in contact with medical medical products and things like that. But the principle is there. And producers will be required to determine the recyclability of their packaging. And again, this is a big change, and it levels the playing field, because some people are doing it and a lot of people are wanting to do it, but it costs them to do it. And if they do it and their competitors aren't doing it, then that's tricky. So this aims to level the playing field, and it is a really it's a really good step. It's a big step for people to do. But the reason why it's going to be really important is that modulated fees within EPR will be based on recyclability, recycling rate, and littering. So if you have a more recyclable packaging, then your costs under EPR will be lower. That's the principle of what this is about. So when we're developing packaging, this is what we need to be looking at. Things need to be fit for purpose. Packaging is all about, does it do its job safely and effectively? Does it protect the product? Does it provide that kind of like manufacturer to consumer journey safety net. The recyclable design in itself is a change to the design thinking, and it's thinking about the whole of life. So it's thinking about how the packaging is produced in the first place, but also thinking about how it will be recycled. And that's, you know, again, is quite a step change in the kind of like the thinking for everybody. A lot of people are already on this journey. It's not completely new, but it is leveling that playing field. And then the final thing is that the material should have recycled content in order to get the best value from the material usage. Again, to what Tim was saying, we need to be making sure that if there's recycled content in there, we're doing it safely. But if we're, you know, if we want to make use of the material that we are collecting, we need to be putting it back into the packaging that we're using. But all of this is great. Without clear communication, it falls down completely. And if something is recyclable, then it doesn't mean to say that it is automatically recycled. You know, the aluminium beverage can is 100% recyclable. That doesn't mean to say that they are 100% recycled. And I can absolutely guarantee that by the fact that, you know, you see them as litter on the streets, you know, kind of like you see things that don't make it into the collection and the sorting mechanism. If it doesn't make it into that collecting system, it won't be recycled. And we as consumers all need to know what we should do about it. And that, again, is really important. I mean, as a packaging person, I get asked all the time, can I recycle this? What should I do with this? And that's the thing. It's kind of like, you know, a lot of the time I don't know. And if I don't know, and I work in the industry, what hope do people have of being able to do the right thing easily? So part of the EPR regulations will include mandatory labeling to make it clearer for the consumer. And we don't know what that's going to look like at the moment, but the idea is that it would be a binary labeling system. So do you or don't you recycle? Can you put it in the recycling, or do you have to put it in the waste? What do you do? At the moment, OPRL, the on-pack recycling label, is currently the most widely used, but there's no requirement to use a label about recycling, and there's definitely no requirement to say that something is not recyclable. So again, everything will have a label, and you know, you will be like, yes, this is recyclable. No, this is not recyclable. And it's a little bit like when GDA was introduced onto packaging, where you kind of like, you're trying to make it really obvious to people whether things are, you know, kind of like good because they include good, healthy amounts of whatever your daily amounts are, or over the top, like too much sugar, which is often what I see. Anyway, that's the labeling. So the timings and details of this, right? We are waiting on details and timings. There were consultations last summer. There were very aggressive timelines, which a lot of people raised concerns about. And DEFRA have come back this last week saying that they are going to delay the start of EPR and continue the PRN scheme through 2023. Now, that is, you know, we're in 2022 already, so that's not a big delay, and there are no details yet of what the implications are, but there is just that kind of like, right, it was supposed to be starting this year, it's not going to start this year, but it will start soon. So so that announcement came out last week there with a, you know, holding notice effectively, and there will be more details to follow. So hopefully that will follow soon. However, the key thing is these are real life packaging challenges. So we do know that, we need to make changes. We need to make our packaging as good, as sustainable, as well designed as possible. The direction of travel is more recyclable packaging with more recycled content. However, the role of packaging in reducing waste is also a really essential factor, and getting the balance of the right material for the right job is essential. So there are a number of occasions where people say we have to get rid of all plastic. Now, there are a number of reasons why you would use plastic for certain purposes, and it is an absolutely brilliant material. How we have used it and how we have managed it after use needs addressing. But if you were to take all of the things that were in plastic and move them to another material, that might not be environmentally the best solution. So one of the things that we want to try and make sure of is that people are as informed as possible to make the right decision. So we're not just jumping from one thing to another because of an emotive thing. We are going, right, actually, let's solve this problem, which is a really big problem, and let's deal with the best comparison between products. And any packaging changes need to be appropriate, carefully evaluated and implemented. So we have to think about food safety, all of the things that Tim talked about. We have to think about product integrity. We have to talk about protection, and we have to think about the environmental impact. So looking to the future, that's where we are now, and hopefully soon we will have clarity on EPR and what that means. But if we look slightly further out to the future, reusable systems, recycling is not the answer to all of our challenges. It is important that we recycle efficiently, effectively, that we have the infrastructure to be able to do it, that we use the recycler well, but it's not the answer to everything. And how we use and reuse packaging is an important system thinking way to reduce waste and to think more along that circular economy mentality. Reusable systems are starting to be kind of like out there and trialed. We need to make sure that they are taken up and that they are socially, kind of like balanced, so they're not exclusive, they are inclusive. But reusable systems really important. And carbon footprint labeling is another thing that I think will help to level the playing field. An independent comparative carbon footprint labeling system would allow us for a more understandable, balanced comparison between formats and materials. So as I say, some of those kind of like, decisions that get made because of an emotive view on a material, if we had a good way of being able to compare that, that would be better. That the whistle stop of where we're at. Thank you very much, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen and we can do the Q&A.
Thank you very much, Jude, and thanks very much to Tim. Great presentations. Tim absolutely loved the section on the biomass aspect, and for Jude, absolutely the piece you put around recyclability versus 100% recycled, probably something that's often overlooked. So really, really interesting. As you said, we'll move into the Q&A section. So if anyone has questions, please add them into the Q&A function that's on the system. But we'll kick off with a couple of icebreakers. Tim, if I was looking to develop a novel bio-based food contact material that could also be consumed, what would I need to consider?
Because that's going to be consumable, that would mean that you would have to register as a food business as well. So there will be more things that you would need to consider. So the types of ingredients that are used, you would need to ensure that other regulations are being met. So food additives regulation comes to mind. There's also hygiene implications that you would need to consider. For example, if it's a film, you could be putting it on, a food product, put it in the fridge, And would that then be safe to then consume, say, for instance, 24 hours or 48 hours later? So yeah, again, as I mentioned before, if you'd like to talk about that in a bit more detail, we'd be happy to hold a meeting with you, and we can see what the requirements and regulations are appropriate.
Perfect, thank you. And Jude, what do you see as the consequences of delay on EPR?
Honestly, my view is that I think the delay on EPR is a good thing because it allows us to have more chance of doing it well. There is still not an enormous amount of time, but I was really happy to hear about the delay because the timelines were so tight, and I know what it's like just to implement artwork changes to allow for a label, never mind understanding all of the work that needs to be done to then know what that label needs to be. So I think if we use the time wisely, then it could be a really good way of getting it as good as possible. That's that would be my dream, that we use the time well and we get a much better system than rushing into it and kind of like trying to hit the timelines. That was an interesting thing, is the feedback that a lot of us gave in the consultations, was that kind of like we were all worried about the timelines being so tight. So it's good that that's kind of like where we're at, but there is no time to waste.
Absolutely. No, good. Okay, so looking at the Q&A, we've got 3 questions that kind of link, so I'll try and piece those together. The plastic packaging tax only applies to UK manufacturing packaging. What about imported?
No, it applies to imported as well.
Cool, there we go, there's the answer for that one. Okay, next, what have we got? So how is the 30% of recycled material ensured? How much traceability is the recycling content, and can this be scientifically analysed?
So all of those are big questions.
Yeah. It's a great question. It's a great question.
The challenges of implementing the recording of data for the tax is big. Ensuring that you're able to say, for instance, that if you're making bottles, that every bottle has 30% recycled content, not like some have 90% recycled content, some have 25% recycled content. Like there's challenges in the managing the supply, managing the kind of like the application of it and how it works. That's an extreme way of talking about it, but yeah, in terms of how that is managed and measured, then there's been a huge amount of work going on. HMRC have actually been brilliant in terms of supporting that, but there's still a lot of questions, and there's a lot of people just not kind of like, there are some people that are going, we know that we're going to be able to ensure that we have that amount of recycled content, and there are other people who've always like had it, and they've been doing the right thing for a while, and they're going, actually supply is going to suddenly suddenly go, because previously we've been using recycled content because nobody else has wanted it. Now there's a competition for that. So there's like the scientific questions about the measurements and stuff I don't want to go into, because I don't I don't know the answers specifically enough, but there's been a lot of work about it. But there are challenges just about the supply, and there is not going to be enough supply to meet the need if everybody were to do it. That's the reality. But then that's also kind of the purpose, because you need that demand to have the infrastructure to then kind of feed it in. So if I look to the kind of like the objectives of what they're trying to trying to do, then yeah, in the reality, I think a lot of people will end up paying the tax for a while.
Okay. Very interesting topic, which I'm sure we'll make another webinar.
It's quite a spicy one, isn't it?
Yeah. So a question for Tim then. Who will be monitoring the recycling centres and sites to ensure that they're using the correct recycler, so that the recycled material is fit for food contact packaging, and will there be a certification for this process?
Yeah, that's a good question. We have preempted that that the EU authorization decisions will be published towards the end of this year by getting an auditing team set up. So they will be going to the recycling plants, and they will have the decisions on their notebook to review and to check that everything that's set out in that decision is being met, and that will ensure that the output material that they're producing for the market is any changes they can notify us, and then we can work with the operator to ensure that that those requirements are still appropriate. Okay,
thank you. I think we've got time for one more. I'm going to get told off for overrunning, but it's fine. What would be the examples of reusable packaging generally? It's one of the questions that's on here. But if you were to summarise them, some examples.
Okay, very quickly. So you've got brands like Loop, who are linking with Tesco's, who have a number of reusable systems that are going in. There are brands like Wild, who are a deodorant that have refill systems. So you kind of like your base unit is reusable and you refill. And there are, like you've got the refill in store type of thing that Asda is certainly trialing. But then there's also lots of research happening in other places. So there is some research happening in the University of Sheffield that's talking about looking at reusable takeaway containers and what will allow people to, kind of like get, make that break off the fact that, yeah, this is fine to do, because a lot of it is public perception as well, and acceptance as much as anything else. But there are some really interesting examples out there of reusable systems, and it's just thinking differently.
Thank you very much. Okay, so thank you both and everyone for attending this webinar today. If we didn't have time to answer all of your questions, please feel free to contact the speakers directly. Their details should be on the screen now. Oh, I'm a bit fast. There we go. We'll share a recording of the webinar, including the Q&A session, to everyone who attended today via email and on our online webinar hub at ifst.org/webinars. So thank you very much to Jude and to Tim and everyone for attending today. And that's all from us. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.